Former President Donald Trump claims that he and his followers are some of the greatest people, the smartest people, the best people. You know, tremendous, amazing, the elite of the elite, very, very smart people. Now, apparently, they're not so good at spelling.
Is that how you spell villain?
No. A-I-N. V-I-L-L. A-I-N. I grabbed the wrong graphic when I sent it to the t-shirt place to make a prototype.
But you still wore it today.
Yeah.
Nailed it. Great job. Look, again, this is a real Trump supporter. This is being interviewed by a comedian. In this case, Jason Selvig, one half of the Good Liars. Because let's be honest, comedians out there interviewing Trump supporters, that's a gold mine. It's some funny shit. Parody has nothing on reality these days. I mean, again, if you're a comedian, this is like the golden years, especially like during the Trump era. Like, you don't really have to go and do much anymore. Oh, new materials. Who needs new material? New jokes? No. I'm just going to go out and talk to Trump supporters. That's all I need to do. And it's because the world has become, probably one of the real world has become the greatest tragic comedy anybody could ever encounter. I've said it before plenty of times. If you're not laughing, you would want to cry because it's just insane. All right, so now 2 more examples here. So now there's that same guy. We're going to see a little bit more by him, and he's going to explain why he's not pro-vaccine. And then, well, I should say first, we're going to have a listen to an older lady explain why no evidence whatsoever could ever convince her that there wasn't any voter fraud in the 2020 election. Take a look.
Donald Trump has never admitted defeat in his life. That's why he wouldn't admit that he lost the election, and that all this voter fraud that he keeps claiming happened didn't actually happen, and Joe Biden won by 7 million votes.
I believe it was voter fraud. I actually believe it.
And have you seen any evidence?
No, they're not going to show me any evidence, but
right.
No, I believe there was voter fraud.
If somebody let you count every single vote yourself, and you could see that Joe Biden won by 7 million votes, would you still believe it? You still wouldn't believe it?
Nope, I still wouldn't believe it. I believe there was a lot of fraud.
Why did you make the decision not to get the vaccine?
For me, type O negative blood. I do smoke, and there were studies that have come out of France. Nicotine users tend to also not be susceptible to things.
Interesting. So nicotine users are not susceptible to things. Lung cancer might be one of the exceptions.
Well, I don't smoke any of the name brand stuff.
Oh, well, that's the difference. If you just smoke the non-brand name stuff, then apparently you're going to be okay. No, that's complete and utter nonsense. I'm going to explain why, of course. But going to that woman, like, no evidence whatsoever. If you were to count the ballots yourself, and still you would come up with the same amount of ballots, that were counted towards Biden versus Donald Trump, and it came up the way that you didn't like it, then you just wouldn't believe it. Again, 2 different, complete different realities that they just create for themselves. It's a bubble, and it's impenetrable. So now, let's go to the guy first when it comes to the COVID, right? So, well, look, I'm a smoker, and smokers apparently during this French study, we couldn't, we can't get COVID. It's a prophylactic, protects you. No, it doesn't. So now there are 2 different French studies that have come out, and they're pretty. Let's just say they're full of some holes, right? So now both of them are not peer reviewed. So that's a big thing. That's a big problem when it comes to studies, because peer review actually goes and takes it and says, okay, this is how you looked at it. This is your methodology. So let's try to replicate this and see if it holds up to scrutiny. These have not been peer reviewed. All right. And so now the other thing that's a big red flag, at least about one of the studies, and not only, of course, do both have massive limitations and both come to the conclusion that, oh, yes, if you use nicotine, then that will somehow prevent COVID infection or help you prevent COVID infection. So now the red flag here comes from the Changzhou study or Shenzhou study or whatever. I can't say the name. You know how terrible I am with names. All right, so, but anyway, the man who did it, one of them was Jean-Pierre Shenzhou, who happens to have had or has long-standing historical links to the tobacco industry. Fascinating. So now let me give you the details on that. Between 1995 and 1998, he had received grants amounting to a total of $220,000 from the Council for Tobacco Research. Interesting. And in the late 1990s, he had actually become a collaborator and advisor for something called Targacept, a pharmaceutical subsidiary of the tobacco company R.J. Reynolds. And in 2006-2007, he had supervised and published studies funded by Philip Morris International. You know, the same people who basically said, oh, you know that link between smoking and cancer? You know, that's not really a thing. I mean, what link? There's no link. No, cigarettes don't cause cancer. Here you go, John Boehner. Here's your checks. You will now hand these out to your members of Congress who are bought by the tobacco industry. Interesting. And very, very interesting. So again, the person who says nicotine might be able to stop COVID just happens to have had a long history of being paid by the tobacco industry. But I'm sure that's just a coincidence, right? I'm sure that's just a coincidence. Look, you got to follow the money. You got to follow the money, folks. And that's it. Once you do, once you follow that money and realize who's getting paid by whom, you can kind of see why people say the way that the things that they do. And I'm not saying, by the way, the pharmaceutical industry also doesn't employ an army of lobbyists. That's why we don't have Medicare being able to negotiate prescription drugs with drug companies. But when it comes to the vaccines, again, it's in everyone's best interest to have a vaccine that is safe and effective and that works. And so you can say, oh, you know, the practices of big pharma are, you know, corruption and lobbying and price gouging. And you would be absolutely correct. In fact, while they were fighting against that provision in the original Build Back Better program, they actually ended up raising the price of about 866 different drugs. Gee, I wonder if they're also based on corruption and money. But at the same time, when you're looking at the efficacy of vaccines and the studies that have been done on them and how they don't really make that much money off of vaccines, at least when it comes to, you know, actually selling the vaccine, you know, again, just look at all the research, all the published and peer-reviewed research on the vaccines that are out against COVID-19 and all the other vaccines that have been shown to be incredibly safe and effective. Anyway, as far as the woman goes, she's an example of too far gone. She huffed way too much copium, right, when it comes to Donald Trump, and will unfortunately never be shaken out of her alternative reality. Do not be like these two chuds.